Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
What happened to the sunny weather yesterday? I had to use my umbrella this morning. Speaking of which, I should be airing this out. So, today's Australia. Australia. I was lucky enough to go to Australia last July. So July would be what season in Australia? That's right, winter, because they're in the southern hemisphere. But as you can see, it was still very beautiful. Kangaroos for the next 162 kilometers. Good morning. And yeah, so Australia, another English-speaking nation. They don't speak exactly the same English as myself as an American. It's different than British English, although we have a lot of similarities. Be it not just from the language, but also from our history. We both kind of broke off from Britain. Ours was a little more violent than theirs. And ours was further back in a few more hundred years back with the War of Independence. But nonetheless, while researching about Australia and while being in Australia, I found a lot of similarities to my background and the background, good morning, the background of my country and my state, even with California, as you'll see here. So, we'll get into some background information of Australia. I'll talk about the travel route that I took through Australia. Hello. I actually drove 4,000 kilometers across the whole country. Does anyone know what Waltzing Matilda is? Waltzing Matilda, you'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. Well, we're going to sing it, and then we'll have a Kahoot quiz. So I'm curious to know, what is it that you already know about Australia, if anything? Kangaroos. Koalas. What else? Sorry?
Opera theater in Sydney.
Sorry?
Opera theater in Sydney.
Yes, Opera Theatre in Sydney. Probably the most famous man-made landmark, most recognizable man-made landmark in Australia. Anything else? What about any Australians? Any Australians you may know of? No? Who? Songs? I don't know songs. I know an Australian song, but I don't know Mr. Songs. Well, what about Steve Irwin? No? Alright, well, we'll learn about Steve Irwin. Let me just set my timer for the camera here and we'll get going. So, country background information of Australia. That's why we're here, because we're going to learn about Australia. Exactly. Australia is down in the Pacific, South Pacific Ocean, south of Asia. It is the smallest continent, the only country continent in the world, and the sixth largest country after, of course, Russia, China, Canada, the United States. There's one more that's bigger than them. Brazil. And other than that, Australia is the sixth largest country in the world. And it was inhabited for more than 50,000 years by the Aborigines. The Aborigines are the native inhabitants of Australia. They are semi-nomadic hunters and gatherers. They still live there today. And 27% of them still live in remote settlements outside of the cities. A lot of them are also, of course, about 3/4 of them are integrated into the bigger cities, but about 1/4 of them still live in the bush, so to say. There's about 700,000 of them today. They make up about 3% of Australia. We kind of saw the same thing with the demographics of the United States, with the Native American Indians. How they were about 2% of the population today. It used to be 100%, now they're about 2%. At one time there were as many as 3 million Aborigines across Australia, but the same situation with the United States. When the white man came, the settlers and the colonies started, then a lot of the native inhabitants died from diseases that they had never previously been exposed to, such as measles and smallpox. Amongst the Aborigines, though, they have more than 250 unique languages. 250 unique languages. Some languages are only spoken by 40 people. So for someone who studies humans, this is a very, very interesting group, demographic of humans to study. In the 1900s, so from 1910 until 1970, there was what's called today as the stolen generations. What happened is that white Australia then took 1 out of 3 children from Aboriginal families and forced them to live in what I think you would call an internat here in Belarus. Forced them to live, took them away from their parents, forced them to live in the white communities, and the thoughts of teaching them English and teaching them to be more productive members of society, but we saw it had an adverse effect, it had a negative effect. Studies that look today show that the 1/3 of Aboriginal children who were taken away from their parents actually were less likely to have completed high school or secondary education, 3 times as likely to have problems with the police, and twice as likely to use drugs. So this whole integration attempt by the Australian government failed, and in the 21st century the government actually did give an official apology and said, hey, we were wrong, we are sorry, this was not the right thing to do, and let's move forward as a cohesive Australia that's black, white, Asian, everything, because that's who we are. And in America we saw the same thing. We saw the same thing with the Native American children. They took them out of the Native American families, put them into schools, and they were not allowed to speak their Indian language or else they were beaten. And yeah, like I said, lots of similarities between Australia and the United States. So how did Australia become a country that it is today? It was established by Great Britain, of course. In 1787, let's see, 11 ships were sent out from Great Britain over to Australia to start a new colony in Australia. It took them 250 days to cross 3/4 of the world, and they sent 6 ships full of prisoners, of convicts. Yes, so Australia was started as a colony, as a penal colony, a colony where they send people who are in prison. And why do you think that they started sending people, why do you think they needed a new place to start sending their prisoners? Any ideas why? Why in this time period did they need a new prison? Any ideas? The British colony covered all, the sun never set on the British Empire. They had colonies all around the world, but right about this time they lost a large part of their colonies. Do you know where that was? It was in the United States. Yes? For many, many years, England had been sending their convicts, their prisoners, to the colonies in the United States. And in the end of the 1700s, the War of Independence, and after America separated, they of course no longer wanted to accept British prisoners. And so Great Britain needed a new place to send their prisoners. So they said, okay, we'll make a new colony in Australia and we'll send our prisoners there. And so sure enough, they did. And in 1788, 1,300 people arrived in what is the area of now Sydney. They didn't like the area of Sydney. They didn't like the bay there, so they actually moved up a dozen kilometers north, direction Newcastle of today, and they made their colony there. And that was the beginning of Australia. It was a British colony for many years, including through the Australian Gold Rush. And it was through the Gold Rush that the country, or the continent at the time, the continent of Australia, truly began to be populated. And same things with my state, California. We saw that in the California presentation that the Gold Rush brought hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people to California in the mid-1800s. Same thing. And California was in 1849, hence our American football team in San Francisco, the San Francisco 49ers. So in California it was in 1849, and in Australia it was 1851. You see the population in 1851. 20 years later, more than 4 times the population that they had before in only 20 years. Imagine within 4 years you had, 40 million people in Belarus. Be A lot. And as with many gold rushes, the people who made the most money were the people who actually catered to the gold seekers. So not those searching for gold, but those who sold them jeans. Yeah? Levi Strauss became famous for the gold rush in California. Same thing in Australia. Those who built houses, those who sold goods, they are the ones who actually made a lot of money off the gold rush. One of these gold mines is Calgary. It's actually Calgary Boulder Gold Pit. Super Pit is what that's called. This is today. And in one of my time-lapse videos later, you'll see this in action, actually with these trucks coming up. But yeah, that's actually the city right here, right on the edge of the gold mine. So mining is still happening in Australia, just not at the rate it was before. So in 1909, Australia unified as a federation of colonies under the British Empire, and in 1931 they officially separated all links between the UK and Australia, and the country is actually made up of states and territories. You have the states: Western Australia, South Australia, Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, and Tasmania. And you have two territories, the Northern Territories and the Australian Commonwealth Territory, where the capital, Canberra, is located. Canberra is actually a city that was built to be a capital. The city did not exist prior to 1900, and they could not decide whether to put it in Sydney or in Melbourne, so they put it halfway between. Any other countries you know of that built a capital for themselves? Any countries? One of them's a big one right in the middle of the former Soviet Union. Kazakhstan? Astana, from Almaty. And another one that I know of is Brazil. Brasilia is also not a native, original city in Brazil, but they built it to be a capital. So Canberra is the same deal. Same deal. And it's the only, I would say, the only important city in Australia that's not located on the water. Everything else is located on the water, and you'll see Canberra is not even in the top 5 populated cities. You see the same thing with Kazakhstan and with Brazil. Same thing is that their main capital is more of a diplomatic place, but it's not really inhabited like the other places of the nation. So, geography of Australia. Like I said, it's the 6th largest country in the world, and it has 7.6 million square kilometers. Elder says 207. So you see, this country is huge. Huge, absolutely huge. 5 times 7, it's like 30, more than 30 times, 35 times larger than Belarus. So Australia as a continent, as a country, is massive. And in the middle of it, there's not much at all. But with all those, as massive as a country it is, 6th largest in the world, it's only 51st when it comes in terms of population. They only have 2.4 million people in the whole country. So it's very sparsely populated when you look at the whole country as a whole, but the populations gather mostly on the coastal side, on the ocean. And when we look at religion, it is 62% Christian, and about 1/3 is not religious or undefined. So 2/3 religious, 1/3 not religious, and there are minority groups of Muslims, Buddhists, and Hindi who have immigrated from parts of the Arabic world, parts of Asia, and India, of course, as well. So, like I said, Australia, most of the population is situated in cities. That means it's urbanized. In fact, it's one of the most urbanized cities in the entire, or in the countries in the entire world. This is Brisbane, in the Gold Coast of Queensland. And you can see the stark contrast of skyscrapers and then the outback where there's just kangaroos. Someone, you said the Opera House, you would recognize this one, yeah? This is the Sydney Opera House. Sydney is the most populous, or the largest city in terms of population in the country of Australia. You have the Opera House, you have the Harbour Bridge. You can actually walk up on top of this. There's like tourist excursions that go up on top of there. And Sydney is located in New South Wales, right over here, in the Pacific Ocean side of Australia. Next, Melbourne. Sydney, 4.8 million. Melbourne with 4.4 million. Almost the same size. Melbourne is more in the south, in the state of Victoria. And there's kind of a competition between Melbourne and Sydney, as you can imagine. Brisbane is the third largest. They're in the Gold Coast, up here in Queensland. And they have about half the size of either of those other, Melbourne or Sydney, with 2.3 million. You see, very similar. Skyscrapers on the water side. They look very similar. Perth is in West Australia, out here. 2 million people. Perth was in the news a lot when that Malaysian Airlines flight in the Pacific went down, and they found, and they were searching for the debris out here. 2.2 million people in Perth, and the most prominent city in West Australia. And Adelaide is the 5th largest here in South Australia with 1.3 million. But like I said, very similar looks to the cities, skyscrapers, big buildings on the waterfront. So we see the whole country of Australia again. You see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 states and 2 territories. The Northern Territory, this is actually not a state. It's the least populated of all of them. Most of the people do not live in the harbor city there of Darwin. Rather, they live along a highway, one highway that splits through the whole territory and comes down here to South Australia. Anyone know what's right here in the middle? Right in the middle. There is desert, and there's one really big thing in the middle of that desert. Yes. There's a big rock called Uluru or Aries Rock. Why do you think it has 2 names? It actually officially has 2 names. What might these 2 names be? Why 2 names that are completely different? Think about it. Yeah, it's the Uluru comes from the Aborigines. Remember I told you they have their own language, they have many of their own languages. That's what the native inhabitants, the Aborigines, for more than 50,000 years called this point. This is a very sacred rock for the Aborigines. And as you see, boom, smack dab in the middle. Nothing, in the middle of nowhere. There's a little settlement next to it today called Alice Springs, but other than that, there's absolutely nothing around this whole area. The rock itself, from this point to this point, is 348 meters tall. That's even a few meters taller than the highest sea level point in all of Belarus. So, and that's not sea level, that's just the distance, my finger's right here. And it is the most recognizable natural landmark in Australia. I did not go there. It just driving along the south here and going up here and coming back would have added an extra 3 or 4 days. It's that big. It's really that big. Another big thing in Australia is the Great Barrier Reef. Have you heard of the Great Barrier Reef? Yes? The Great Barrier Reef consists of more than 2,900 islands. Almost 3,000 reefs, over 900 islands, covering an area that's almost twice the size of Belarus. This reef is massive. Almost twice the size of this entire country is this coral reef. And it's one of the natural wonders of the world. It's so big, you can actually see the reef underwater from outer space. From the International Space Station, you can see the reef, believe it or not. And it's also been a sign of global warming, as there's a phenomenon called coral bleaching that happens when the water gets too hot and the organisms die. And in the north side of the reef, closer to Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, we are already seeing massive amounts of coral bleaching, and all of these different kinds of organisms growing in the coral are dying. And in our lifetimes, I truly believe the Great Barrier Reef will be an indicator of the impact of ecological damage and global warming on the Earth. And but it's an amazing sight that I can only imagine what it's like to swim amongst that. You know, it's like a whole other world underneath there. Yeah. But this blew my mind. Belarus, 207,000 square kilometers. The reef itself, almost twice the size. Tasmanian tiger. Have you heard of the Tasmanian tiger? No? This was the largest carnivorous marsupial. Marsupial is like a kangaroo is also a marsupial. An anteater is a marsupial. Huh? Сумчате. Сумчате. Самая большая сумчате. Вот. Было. Но больше нет. 1936, the Tasmanian tiger went extinct. It faced the predators of the mainland Australia first in the 1800s. You can imagine it actually was a predator with, it had conflicts with the kangaroos. It's kind of the size of a medium-sized dog, yeah, it was. And it eats meat, and so for the colonists and for the people living in Australia, they were actually a nuisance because they would eat the sheep and they would eat the chicken. And in the 1800s, there was a bounty put on Tasmanian tigers. Every Tasmanian tiger you killed, you got 1 pound. A pound in the 1800s was equivalent to about 100 pounds today. Imagine if you went out and shot 3 Tasmanian tigers, you made 300 pounds, enough money for the whole month for your family. So they were strongly hunted, and because of that, in 1936, the last one actually died on the Tasmania Island state in the south of Australia, and they no longer exist today. There is the Tasmanian devil. Do you know the Tasmanian devil maybe from Disney? Yes? I knew the Tasmanian devil from Disney cartoons. The Tasmanian devil still exists. It is much smaller, and is also marsupial, and also eats meat. And then today it is the largest meat-eating marsupial in the world. Also exists in Australia. Kangaroos. Who likes kangaroos? Yes? A lot of people like kangaroos. Who's met a kangaroo? Maybe after you meet them, you won't like them. Kangaroos. So, when I was flying into Australia, the guy sitting next to me, I told him that, oh, I'm meeting a friend, we're going to drive across the country. Sydney to Perth, 4,000 kilometers. And he said, hey, man, when the sun starts to go down, you be careful of them roos, all right? Yeah, really? Be careful of the kangaroos when the sun goes down. All right, buddy, yeah. I laughed. I thought it was funny, but it was actually a serious deal. Yeah, I'll get more into that later. But these kangaroos are actually very, I'd say, they fight by nature. They fight, not like to the death, but like if you're eating my patch of grass and I want to eat here, we'll have a duel. Or if you're with the girl I want to be with, we'll have a duel. And these kangaroos are the size of a medium-sized human, and they are very strong. And their tails are very strong, and they will actually attack by kicking with their hind legs and balancing on their tails. Okay? I'm going to guess that some of you have seen this video. Let's just see.
We're all looking forward to seeing Max on the ball. When, to our horror, it turns out to be something else altogether.
Oh no! Here! Hey! Go, just this! Whoa, go!
But all is not as it seems. The big buck actually has hold of the dog, not the other way around.
Have you seen this?
Runs in, we realise this could get dangerous. Well, we're not sure what's going on here, but the root has the dog, not the other way around. Max calmly waits for his owner to come and help. But Root sees the odds stacking against him and tries to gut the dog with his claws one last time. His powerful arms anchor the dog by the breastplate as Max doubles his efforts to escape. Finally, the Root switches his attention to Tonks and sizes up the human to be his next victim. Tonks gives the kangaroo his space, but the cranky buck comes forward, ready to attack. To save himself, he launches a right hand to the kangaroo's snout. The punch swivels the roo's head as he throws his claws out to grapple and gouge. Then they eye each other off. Tonks makes the right decision again and backs off, leaving the buck stunned as to what has just taken place. He continues to stand his ground, like he has done many times before when fighting for breeding rights against other big boomers like himself out his day.
You can hear how he speaks differently than I do, yeah? You can hear that difference in the accent. But that was a video that went viral last year, actually. I think something like, that's crazy, man, like half a billion people saw that or something. That was a video that went viral though last year from Australia. It's not fake, it's a real deal. So this is a short BBC documentary into the fighting nature of kangaroos and yeah, how that works within their society.
Full-blown fights are so dangerous, they're not entered into lightly. But when two males square up, it's time to clear the arena. Anything goes in these power struggles. Eye gouging is entirely within the rules. So is kicking below the belt. The dominant male's skill is already telling. They risk broken bones and internal injuries. Suddenly, it's all over. The champion has beaten off the challenger, at least for now.
So, kangaroos might be cute and fuzzy, but they will fight you. Steve Irwin. Do you recognize his face? Steve Irwin was the first Australian that I knew as a child growing up. He was famous for his work with animals. He was known as the crocodile hunter, but not really hunting to kill, rather would go in and take a crocodile out of an area where people were living and then move it to a reserve, a safe haven for animals. He was unexpectedly and tragically killed actually in 2006 when, did you hear about how he died? There was he was filming an episode with stingrays, right off of the coral reef actually, and one of the stingrays that he was with there, it's thought that the stingray saw his shadow and thought that it was a tiger shark, one of its predators, and flung its ray. A stingray is flat like your hand, or it's big. It's maybe half the size of this table. But it's got a tail, and on the end of that it's got a barb. And it shot its barb and flung its tail at Steve Irwin, and it punctured him through his chest, went right through his heart, and killed him. And he was a father of 2 kids, and yeah, it was a sad moment for all of, for the world, I would say, because he was one of the most loved Australians of this time. He did have a son of 3 years at the time, and I saw just in February, his son was on the Jimmy Kimmel show, and the late night show in America, and I swear he's just like his dad. His son is 13, so his son's like 12 or 13 years old, but he came with all these animals and had Jimmy Kimmel with these animals, and it was really cool to see, like, wow, it's a mirror image of his dad that I knew from my childhood growing up watching his animal shows. So a important Australian that you should know about. So, like I said, I went to Australia. I get to travel, luckily I get to travel from Sydney, went up to Newcastle, and then drove 4,000 kilometers across the outback all the way to Perth. I met with a friend, and she was going for an exchange semester. She's from Perth, but studied in Newcastle and had to take her car back home. I said, hey, I'll join. That's the road trip. So, 4,000 kilometers across the entire country. Did it in a matter of a few days. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like 4 or 5 days we took across there. And things that I noticed, things that were unique to that. There is the second longest straight road in the world, the longest straight road in Australia. It's called the 90-mile straight. It is 146 kilometers straight. No turns. Straight. You could just put your car on autopilot and go for 146 kilometers. I drove this route, and I have a time lapse that goes across the entire 146 kilometers that you'll see in a minute. And yeah, that was, it's so straight that they actually turned part of it temporarily into a runway. This is for an airplane to land, because in the middle of the outback, they don't have cities, but sometimes they need medical help for people. They need to evacuate someone out of there. They need to bring medical aid in, and the doctors and the ambulances, so to say, they actually fly in and land on that highway. They'll have lights that'll flash that will say, you know, stop, because a plane may be landing, and the plane lands right there. That might sound really dangerous, but when you consider that when driving across the outback, that we pass another car maybe once every 5 minutes, like one car every 5 minutes, you really realize, okay, that'd be very easy to land a plane on there, yeah? No problem. And at the car, they can easily see, oh, a plane's coming, I need to get off the road. And the cool thing about that is that when you only see one car every 5 minutes, and you see it coming at you a long ways away, everyone gets ready in the car to wave. Every single car that passed in the outback, we're driving, and we wave. Maybe just a little, hey, but sometimes the whole high five, you know? And not just me, but the passenger in the front seat of the other car as well. Because you so rarely saw another car or another human being. You saw a lot of kangaroos though, and you saw a lot of dead kangaroos. In fact, I saw more dead kangaroos than I saw live kangaroos. Because they got roadkill basically. And yeah, you see signs like this all over the place. And the kangaroos are actually very dangerous in the fact that when it gets dark, you really can't drive afterwards. Because we drove into the first night, this place called Kobar. And went in there to get gas. And I went in and asked the lady behind the counter who worked there, hey, do you think we can make it to Wilkenya, which is about another 2.5 hours? It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And she said, oh boy, my uncle Charlie, he came down from there last night. He took him 6 hours to get from Wilkenya down here to Kobar. He was dodging them roofs left and right. He's lucky he made it one piece. And I realized, whoa, if the local lady's saying we gotta stay here and it's not really even dark yet, then okay, we're staying. And sure enough, the next morning, stayed in the motel, next morning left, and 15 minutes outside of the town, there was a car that had just been freshly destroyed. A roo had hit it. It had hit a roo. The roo destroyed the whole roof of the whole hood of the car and the glass as well. No one knows if the people inside if they're all right or not. But imagine, it's like hitting a human going 130 kilometers an hour. It's very dangerous. And you're actually told if you hit a kangaroo that you should knock it out of the car because it could still be alive. And it could seek revenge, and actually it's the situations where they've actually killed the driver. As the driver gets out of the car, and the kangaroo then kills the driver. So, the roos are actually really a dangerous thing. And there are a lot of them. They're everywhere. Camels are actually not native to Australia. Any idea how camels or why camels would be there today? What are camels used for in other parts of the world?
Carrying loads.
Yes. She said carrying loads. Exactly. Camels were transported to Australia from the Arabic world for transport, for carrying loads across these great distances with as little amounts of water. Before there were planes, trains, highways, and everything. But today the camels are not really needed, but they're abundant, and they actually their hooves are not made. They don't complement the ground in Australia, and the hooves actually destroy the ecoculture in the earth in Australia, and they've been seen as a nuisance. And they actually have outings where people will go up in a helicopter with a machine gun and they just mow down camels.
Are they wild?
Yes, they have. The camels are wild. They run across the outback, and it's a serious issue actually today because they're destroying the earth. So the camel is an issue. Roos are dangerous at night. Whoa. Because of the roo issue, the cars in the outback all have these things called roo bars. And roo bars, as you can see, the roo would then hit this area and would be pushed down instead of hitting the hood and then flying up against the windshield, potentially killing the driver. So this might look extreme, but it's actually very useful. And this is a sight I saw hundreds of times across Australia. Dead roos all over the place. But the roo bars actually protect that from going up here and actually potentially killing the driver. Yeah. Also, the trucks, they will have roo bars. And I saw some trucks that had roo bars, actually camel bars, up on the glass, so that if the truck hit a camel, that it would also not potentially kill the driver. This may sound crazy to us, but in the outback, like, this is a serious, life-threatening thing, and it's taken very seriously. You actually see huge trucks that just go across the outback, 4,000 kilometers in the middle of nowhere. Another beautiful thing across Australia, the south of Australia, is the Great Australian Bight. That is this. It's caused by a glacier. It looks like someone just took a bite out of the southern part of the continent. And this creates a view like that. That is the Great Australian Bight. This whole southern part right here looks like that. For driving a whole day, it looks like that. It is gorgeous. You'll see this later in a time lapse as well. And there's also in the, right before Esperance, right about here, there is a piece of the Skylab. The Skylab was an American satellite sent up to the space to run tests in the 70s, and upon re-entry, it crashed in the Australian outback, and today it stands on top of a museum, and you can actually go inside and touch the Skylab that fell out of space. The city, Baladonia, actually sent a bill to NASA for $400 saying, this is a bill for littering in our city, in our outback, or not really a city. And NASA refused to pay it. A local radio station actually then made a fundraiser as a joke and paid the $400 bill. But yeah, not much goes down in Australia except for space junk. Here's a short little time lapse that I made. It's just like a minute long of sites in Australia that you may recognize from what you've seen so far. This is all 90 miles or 146 kilometers you'll drive straight. So, Waltzing Matilda. Has anyone heard of Waltzing Matilda? No. Sorry? Anyone speak German? You do, yes? You know the term auf der Waltz. If someone is auf der Waltz, it means that they're walking, not like a pilgrimage, but more like It's someone who goes off their waltz. They're dressed in their traditional clothing, it's black and white, and they go around with all their belongings and they offer their trade, their skill of maybe building homes or working in the fields. And they offer their skills, their work, for food and a place to sleep. That's called auf der Waltz. It's not the Wiener Waltz, the Vienna waltz or dancing, but it's more of walking. So, Waltzing Matilda is the unofficial national anthem of Australia. And it's by far the most popular song in Australia. It goes back to more than 100 years. It was written as a poem in 1895. Like I said, the unofficial anthem of Australia. This is a swagman, which is like a vagabond or a hobo, guy who's going around with no home. And this is his billy, which is a tin can he uses to make food. And this would be like a billabong, a lake or a pond. And cold bar tree is this tree here, a typical tree in Australia. And this is a swag. And so it's basically a rucksack, a backpack made out of just a blanket with tied up as blanket. So that is the swag band that this is referring to, and this has been played in many different ways. We're going to see here a classical version of it. We'll see also a kid's version of it, and we're going to sing it ourselves as well. So this is Waltzing Matilda. Because you see half the people are crying as you see on the screen. And this song has always been a part of Australian history before Australia was even a country. You see here Australian soldiers in World War II singing the same song in a march. So, when I heard this song the first time, I had no idea what it was talking about. And even as a native English speaker, I had to have a lot of things translated because there's words I had never heard of. Swagman is the vagabond, like I said. The swag is his backpack. The billabong is the lake or the small pond. Coolabah is the tree. The billy is that tin pot. Waltzing is walking. Matilda is actually the name that he gave to his backpack. It's a very lonely life when you name your backpack a woman, yeah? And a jumbuck is a sheep, and a tucker is food. Tucker bag would be food bag. A squatter is a landowner. A thoroughbred, any of these. A thoroughbred is a horse, we said the same thing. A trooper is a policeman. Now what is this story about? So basically, it's this guy, the swagman, who's sitting by a billabong, boiling his water in his billy, in his pot, and he sees a jumbuck or a sheep come down to drink from the water. He jumps up and he goes and grabs the sheep and throws it into his bag. And the landowner sees this and comes with the policeman and says, hey, give us that sheep back. And the swagman says, no, you will never catch me alive. And he jumps into the pond, the billabong, and he dies. He can't swim. That's the story. That's the whole song. But it's by far the most important song in Australian history and of Australia. So, how to show? Here we go.
Once a jolly swagman camped by a billabong under the shade of a cool liver tree, and he sang as he watched and waited till his good boy would come a waltzing Matilda with me. Waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, you'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. And he sang as he watched and waited till his good boy would come a waltzing Matilda with me. Down came my jumper to trick at that billabong. Up jumped the swagman and grabbed him with glee, and he sang as he shoved that jumper king next to her back. You come a waltzing Matilda with me. Waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, you'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. And he sang as he shoved that jumper king next to her back. You come a waltzing Matilda with me. Rode the squatter, mounted on his thoroughbred. Down came the troopers, 1, 2, 3. Whose is the jumper? You've got in your tucker bag. You come a waltzing Matilda with me. Waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, you'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. Whose is the jumper? You've got in your tucker bag. You come a waltzing Matilda with me. Up jumped the swagman, sprang into the billabong. You'll never take me alive, said he, and his ghost may be heard as you pass by that billabong. Come a waltzing Matilda with me. Waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, you'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. And his ghost may be heard as you pass by that billabong. Come a waltzing Matilda with me.
So now you all know Waltzing Matilda. Well done, well done. So, yeah, that is by far the most important Australian song. I had heard it before I'd been to Australia. I didn't know what it was about until I had a true Australian explain it to me. But that's an important one to know. So, maybe one day in the future you'll hear that again, you'll remember that. We do have a Kahoot quiz we're going to try this time. It's new for most of you, I think. Next week we'll talk about regional American cuisine, American foods. So eat breakfast or else that'll be a very difficult one because I'll be very hungry. I will have another American here next week presenting this with me. He's from another part of the United States other than California, so we can kind of compare and contrast what we eat at home. We'll talk then about Belarusian cuisine because he's never been to Belarus either. And yes, like I said though, we have a Kahoot quiz. And what is a Kahoot quiz? For those of you who have not done this before, basically, if you have a smartphone, you can pull that out, and it's an interactive quiz where, if I can connect this to my, yes. So, this interactive quiz, there's going to be 10 questions that come up on the screen. That is in, last one's in. Okay, 25, here we go. Australia quiz. This is the biggest single structure made by living organisms and can be seen from space. The Great Barrier Reef. Almost everyone got that right. We've got the resolution, when I change it through this, it moves it a little bit for the VGA, so we can't see everything exactly, but everyone but 2 got that right, the Great Barrier Reef. Next question. Oh, here we go. Alexei is in first, Kemal second, Matilda Keeper third. You see how it works? All right, here we go. Next question. They will get harder. They will be more difficult. What is the name of the unofficial Australian national anthem? Waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda. The Outback anthem. I'd like to see what that one is. Yeah, 3 of you thought that. Waltzing Matilda. First place, Alexei still in first. Matilda and Masyanaya. Next question. From the song Waltzing Matilda, what is the definition of a billabong? It's getting more difficult. Yeah, I see. Yeah. Maybe next week I sit in the front row. A small lake or pond. Ooh, look at that. Split board. Woo, 7. Leaderboard might have changed now. What do we got? Alexei still in first. Yulia in second. Oleg in third. Yu King in kick. Next question. What is the name of the Australian indigenous people? Not the swag man, not the Indians, it's the Aborigines. Most everyone got that right. Wonderful, well done. Yulia takes the lead. Oleg is in second, Alexei in third. Paulina Molina got in the top 5. Next question. For about how many years have Australian Aborigines inhabited the continent? Ooh. 50,000 years. Most everyone got that right. About half. 500 years too short. 5,000 years too short. 500,000 years. I don't know if us humans were around 500,000 years ago. Yulia is still in first. Next question. What Australian city is this? Wait for it. Boom. Oh, Sydney, very well done. That was an easy one. That was an easy one. Not easy for 5 people though. That had the opera building, the opera house that we talked about earlier, yes. Look how close that is. About 30 points, 32 points. Next question. What is the capital of Australia? Look at all those fast answers coming in there. That's good. Canberra, that's correct. Not Sydney, not Melbourne. They didn't know which one to put it in, so they put it in between in the middle. Built the new city. Oh, Brandon takes the lead. Next question. Which space object was found in Western Australia? Was it wasn't Hubble, it wasn't ISS, it was Skylab. All right, getting down to the final questions. Brandon's got a sizable lead. 2 questions to go. Approximately how many kilometers from Sydney to Perth? $4,000 kilometers. I'm glad no one picked 800. That makes me happy. Okay, good. Last question. Whoa, Brandon missed it. Ouch. Poloko and Yulia and Alexei. Next and final question. Boom. What is the name of this famous Australian landmark? Oh, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. It's a real tough one. Uluru or Aries Rock. Oh, most everyone got that right. Okay, good job, guys. Let's see. The winner is Bolokpa. Who is that? Okay, my friends. You have got a Reese's Peanut Butter Cups from America. Who is Alexei? Second place. Who's Alexei? Molodets, Alexei. Molodets. So, there we go. Here was Paulina was in third. Paulina Molina was in third. Ta was in fourth, and Brandon was in fifth. You like the Kahoot quiz? Yeah. Cool. We'll have another one next week. I think next week we'll actually be able to get a prize for multiple people. I might be bringing something edible. We'll see. So, next week, same time, with a guest speaker as well, talking about American food. Have a great day, and thank you for coming here today.
Thank you.
See you next week. Please turn on the lights.